Okay. All right, we'll just go ahead and get started, and I'm recording it too. It's just up the screen, so okay, no one's faces in it, I promise. And if anyone comes in, they can take a seat. So we're going to talk a little bit today about generalization of skills across and outside of the classroom. I'm sure you'll probably already do this in your classrooms, but just some different strategies or examples. You may do it, you don't even realize it, and you're like, oh, that's what it's called. So there we go. A little bit about me. I received my bachelor's from Louisiana State University. I'm from New Orleans in kinesiology. And then I got my master's in behavior analyst online during COVID from McNeese. And I'm currently at the University of Utah right now getting my PhD in school psychology. I'm a BCBA and also a licensed behavior analyst as well. I work in the district, in none of y'all's classrooms, but I do. I'm at Desert Hills High, Middle, Crimson, and Sunset. Yeah, so I just do, I supervise RBTs, help out with behavior plans and stuff in the classroom. So our schedule today, we're gonna talk about why we care about generalization, what it is, some go-to strategies and examples. And there's only 3 of us. If you wanna do a breakout group, we can, or we can just talk, and then questions. Since there is also only 3 of us, if you'll have specific questions, feel free to, we don't have to wait till the end. All right, so why do we care? If our students can only turn off the light switch in one room, can they really turn off the light switch in everywhere else? No, they don't really have that skill. So what is the point of even learning it if they can only do it in one place? Eventually, all of our students will graduate, come here, and we want to set them up for success. If they're only independent in the classroom under specific conditions with the light hitting just right and the air conditioning on, that's great for now, but how is that going to benefit them long term in the future? Generalization is something that we already teach every day. For some of our students, that still is a little harder to obtain, so we'll just talk about some strategies for that. Generalization is ultimately the end goal of what y'all are doing every day and what we teach. Okay, so what is generalization? It is the ability to perform a skill under various conditions. It's learned in one context, demonstrated in the next, and then it's a skill that can be performed in a variety of ways, but still gets the same end goal. Example, turning off a light in here or in the bathroom. Learning math at school. Can you also do math at home? Can you do your homework? Can you only do it at your desk in school? So you want to be able to generalize that skill outside of just the classroom. And then for some of our older kids, things like buying things with money. Can they use coins? Can they use dollars? Can they use a check? Can they use a credit card? Teaching those variety of skills to get the same end goal. So there's 2 main aspects of generalization, stimulus and response. Stimulus generalization is multiple stimulus that end up stimuli with the same response. So in this picture, it's pizza, apple sandwiches, chips. You see them, the response is always going to be pick up and take a bite of them. In the last example that I used, learning math at school. So the stimulus is at school, at home, on the bus, and then the response would be, oh, I can do this math problem if given to me. Response generalization is this one stimulus that elicits multiple responses. So if you go up to a kid and you say, hi, they can say, hi, howdy, how are you? All those things, but it's one stimulus that's giving multiple different responses. In the previous slide, buying things with money, the stimulus would be, oh, I want this, and then different responses are using cash, using a card, using a check, those kind of things. So our go-to strategies, we're going to talk about 6 today. Training loosely, sufficient exemplars, programming common stimuli, introducing contingencies, indiscriminate contingencies, and then teaching a range of equivalent responses. So training loosely is incorporating a large range of relevant stimulus situations. And then, that sounds like a lot. Essentially what you want to do is vary the time of the day, the temperature, who's giving the task, the location, phrases, wordings. Essentially, you want to be as predictably unpredictable as possible when you teach these skills. So I know a lot of our kids love order, we love a routine, and that's great. And it's great to teach math at a certain time and science at a certain time during the day, but how can we also incorporate math in the afternoon a little bit, or doing the other things, switching the schedule up a little bit to make sure that they are still learning that. Or if you have a para or an RBT who's specific to one child, well maybe, and they're teaching them that skill, can you also step in and teach them so they can learn with you, learn with a peer tutor, other people, just that we're not just teaching them in one condition, they can only do this. Sufficient exemplars. So you want to teach a different number of stimulus examples, more people, more setting, kind of like what I just said. These kind of go hand in hand. So can you have the student perform a task but no one else can? The student can't really do it. Specific little examples would if you're using math and you're using manipulables, maybe using blocks or Legos or stickers or other things that are still getting the same end result. For life skills, if they're working on folding, can they fold a towel? Great. Can they fold a t-shirt? Great. Can they fold a bed sheet? I can't fold a fitted sheet, so I have to work on that, but all those kinds of things. Or like I keep going back to with the money, can they pay in various ways? If you're doing cooking classes, can they cook on an electric stove and then they get home and they don't know how to cook under that stove, or an easy bake oven, or use the microwave? So it's various different ways to do that. Programming common stimuli. So this is similar to having multiple exemplars in multiple situations, but it is situation specific. So this was a little bit more challenging to do, especially in a classroom. I always go to the example of, okay, if your student is going to go work at McDonald's and they have that job, and they have to be the cashier, can you get a cash register in your classroom? Can you get like the McDonald's uniform that they're gonna wear in their classroom? Can they practice that specific situation that's going to happen, and the room will look the same, or those kinds of things, so they can be successful in a new environment. Natural maintaining contingencies, so teach behaviors that will likely be successful in contact reinforcement in other settings. For this one, I always go to like, attention-seeking behaviors. So I'm sure we all have kids that like to throw things or hit other people or tear sheets in half when you're not paying attention to them because they want your attention. So can you teach them to raise their hand and say, hey, like, am I doing a good job, versus throwing or yelling to get your attention? So it's behaviors that will contact reinforcement in other settings. So if a kid raises their hand, they'll probably be called on in your classroom or the music classroom or science or wherever, and that'll get the same response. And then teaching behaviors that will occur in the natural environment to reinforce behaviors. So I am from the South. I'm very yes ma'am, no ma'am. And since moving up here, which is great, in the South, you teach all your kids like, oh, say yes ma'am, say no ma'am. But then coming up here, I will be like, oh yes ma'am, someone's like, don't call me that. I'm like, all right, that's fine. So I don't want to teach the kids in the classroom to say yes ma'am, because up here it's not going to contact that reinforcement. So what's the point of doing it? And it might even negatively impact them. I've had one of the teachers that I worked with, I was like, oh yes ma'am, and she's like, I'm so old, like, don't do that to me. And I was like, okay, I'm so sorry, like, I'm never gonna talk to you again, like, it's fine. So that kind of happens with our kids when we're like, oh, don't do that, but in the long run. So can we teach our kids things that will contact reinforcement from everyone in the long run, in like a bigger scale? Indiscriminable contingencies, so situations in which the student doesn't know if a response will provide reinforcement. So this one's tricky. When a student is learning the skill, when you're teaching a new concept and they're getting it right, you want to provide reinforcement every time they get it right, so that they're like, oh, this is how I do addition, oh, this is how I read this word, and provide that so they have the foundational skill. And then after they've mastered that skill, you want to provide it on a more random kind of time. So they know that sometimes they'll get reinforced and sometimes they won't, but like maybe this time I will, and so they want to keep doing it. For example, not in the school setting, but if I want my boyfriend to do something, so doing the dishes at home, when I see him do it, every time he does it, I'm gonna be like, oh my God, thank you so much, like you're such a big help. What TV show do you want to watch tonight? Like, can I give you a kiss? Can I give you, like, can I rub your feet? What can I do? Like, I'm so appreciative that you did this for me. And he's like, sweet. So then he's gonna start doing it more and more and more. And the more he does it, I'm gonna fade out a little bit to being like, oh, thank you, like this is so helpful. And then the next time he does it, I'm just not gonna acknowledge it. And then the third time he does it, I'm gonna be like, this is the best. And so you're kind of just varying when they will get that reinforcement and when they won't. So it's more of a random and more natural situation. Functionally equivalent responses. So teaching multiple responses to handle natural social situations. So paying for things. When you go out to the store, a lot of people don't take cash anymore. So if you're only teaching cash transactions in a classroom, when they go to the store and they're like, no, we only take card, is your student going to be able to understand how to do that? The teaching responses that are going to get you the same response. Or opening a bottle. If they can't open the bottle, can they use a wine opener to open the bottle? Or can they use a bottle can opener, or whatever it is if they can't twist it off? They all have the same end goal and the same response, but it's just different ways of getting there. I know one of my friends is a math teacher, and she does Common Core, and I'm like, I don't understand any of what Common Core is. This is not how I learned how to do math. She's like, yeah, we teach it different ways, but it's just whatever works best for your student. We want them to be able to do everything that we teach them, but ultimately they can choose what they prefer to do that kind of thing. So putting it all together. So we'll take an example of just social skills and greetings. If we're going to teach our student how to respond to say hello, firstly for training loosely. So say we start by only telling them hello when they walk into the classroom. Then we're going to tell them hello when they walk into the lunchroom. Then we're going to tell them hello when they walk into the front door. And we're going to have our pairs start doing it. We're going to have our peer tutors start doing it. So they're getting used to responding and saying hello in various different situations. Training sufficient exemplars. So sometimes I'll be like, oh, hi. Sometimes I'll say howdy. Sometimes I'll say what's up. So they're getting, their response is still going to be the same, but they have all these different situations that could potentially happen, and what do they do if that happens? Common stimuli. So this is going to be situation specific. So if they're a greeter at a store, you want to make your classroom kind of look like that store, so when someone walks in, they can be like, oh, hello, and practice that skill.
Where we go?
What's next? 4, introduce to naturally maintaining contingencies. So with the example of giving greetings, sometimes where people, wait, my bad, sorry, I got on the wrong number. So social skills in general and saying hello are usually going to have naturally maintaining contingencies. If you say hello to a stranger, they're probably going to say hello to you back. So that is one of the easier ones to do. But then with number 5, using indiscriminable contingencies, sometimes when you say hello to somebody, they might not say hello back. They may have their headphones in, they may be having a bad day. So when your student tells you hello, maybe sometimes you're talking to another student and you can't tell them hello, but still like coming back to that and being like, oh, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you hello earlier, but you did a great job coming back to your seat. Or you did if somebody ignores you in the hallway when you say hello, how do you teach? Sometimes it's okay and sometimes it's not, but you can't just go up to them and be like, hi, hello, until they give you a response. That's not appropriate. But sometimes they will be told hello, and sometimes they won't. And then teaching a range of functionally equivalent responses, so kind of like the sufficient exemplars, when you say howdy and they say hi, now they say hi, or now you say hi and they say howdy. So it's kind of the opposite and like the same. So they go hand in hand. Well, we can break out groups, or if y'all have specific examples for generalization or like tricky things that you can think of that you want to talk out, I'm happy to help. If not, that's okay too.
I have, well, it's kind of a general, so like my harder behavior kids like will typically work best with me, and so I'm trying to give the paras that same power. Do you have any tips for that?
Yeah.
So we all do the same thing like with their behavior plan, but sometimes just give my paras a harder time than me.
Yeah, so with that, I always like to think of one, they are not giving you a harder time because you're doing something different. Like, yes, you're all doing the same behavior plan, but either like your tone or the way that like their connection to you is different than they are to the paras. So if you're ever like, we're all doing the same thing, but I'm getting a different response.
Something's different.
Something is different. Like, you might not know what it is. You might look like they're great aunts, and that's why they like you. Like, something is different. So what I would do is try to build that foundational aspect of like, oh, they like me, instead of the para always being like, do you work, do you work, do you work? Maybe the para on a break will go and single that one student out and be like, hi, like, you're doing a great job. Like, can I play with you? Can I do whatever activity with you? So it becomes kind of like that friendshipy vibe, and they like them more, and then they might listen to them more in like that aspect.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
I'm working on
And I mean, I don't know, sometimes kids just like certain people, and that's fair. I used to work at a clinic, and some kids would like other techs and not others, and that's fair. Like, you're allowed to not like certain people, but you still do have to act the same way with other people. So it's just building that, like, maybe the para on the first day of school did something that rubbed them the wrong way, and now they're not going to forget about it. But now they have to go back to the basics and kind of rebuild that relationship. And it doesn't have to always be like singling them out, but even just if a para's walking by being like, oh, great job, like, you're doing great, and then like keep going. But it's just providing more of that reinforcement aspect of it, than just being like, do your work. Oh, you're having a bad time, well, stop hitting me, and like trying to control the situation.
Yeah.
And they're coming off more as a friendly vibe first kind of thing.
Okay. Hi.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Oh, both of you! I didn't recognize you over there. It's like my two favorite people.
Oh, we missed
What's
you.
that?
Said we missed you.
Oh, I know. Plus, I just evolve so much every year.
Yeah, it looks different.
Doesn't it?
So, yeah.
Yeah, we've almost got it destroyed. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Any other questions, concerns?
No, I have a student, like, it's just
Mhm.
something I'm doing with him. He's the biggest slob ever. He just makes a mess. It's like Pigpen on Charlie Brown. There's always like a mess around
Mhm.
here. So we started teaching him to keep like his area clean in the classroom, and then we moved it to keeping his area clean in the lunchroom.
Mhm.
So we're just trying to expand on that because he is just like a little tornado of stuff is just always everywhere. So.
Well, that's a really good example of, I mean, it's not going to happen overnight. Like,
No.
generalization is something that is going to take a long time. Some kids pick it up super quick and they're fine, and some kids don't. So with the cleaning up situation, if it's crumbs, maybe you teach them like, oh, we're going to use a handheld broom, or we're going to use a vacuum. Okay, we're going to use like a wipe. So it's different. It's all cleaning up, but it's getting to it like different ways kind of thing.
We started by just making sure everything's put in the trash, that all your little scraps are
Mhm.
in the trash, and that when you clean up in the lunchroom, you clean up everything, all the garbage, and throw it away.
I'd also talk to like mom if she's open to it, because it's hard to, when our kids go home, you don't know what's going on at home. So like, you're teaching them this skill, and then you want it to generalize outside of the classroom, and not everyone's on board, and mom doesn't make him clean up his stuff and she does it for him, then why would he do it at school? So it's kind of learning that, like,
You can kind of tell which, the situation that they're coming from.
We used to have a kid who, his mom was like, oh, he can't put on his shoes, he can't tie them. And we'd go to the gym and take his shoes off, and we're like, okay, put them back on. You do it and you tie them. I'm like, oh, you can do it, you just don't want to do it. You can't do it at home because of whatever's happening at home, but you can do it here perfectly fine.
But that comes down to also, like, you want the attention that mom's giving you one-on-one
Mhm.
while she's putting on your shoes and tying them.
Right. And same with cleaning up, maybe mom at home is cleaning up with him, so
Mhm.
she's getting more mom one-on-one time when he is
Yeah.
cleaning up. So it's just kind of getting everyone together, we're all on the same team, what can we do? And maybe at home, it could be here, or just in general, like cultural things, maybe at home, like, men don't clean up, so that's like a woman's job, so kind of that situational too, like, how do you work around that, and taking like those considerations, working with the parents and getting a big aspect of it. And then sometimes you just gotta take the L, and it's like, all right, he's only gonna clean up at school and at the lunch table, but I'm doing what I can do, and the rest is up there.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And then the last one, any questions, but we kind of just answered that, so. That's it. Easy, quick, simple.
I mean, there's all kinds of, I can't come up with specific right now.
Right.
because, I mean, there's been plenty of times where I'm like, okay, how do we get them to do this out of the room? Or
Mhm.
out, away from this para, or, yeah.
So usually in like those types of situations where it's, how do we bring it into a new environment, new people, things like that, it's upping the reinforcement. It's gonna feel obnoxious to have someone, like, if you're trying to introduce a new person, to constantly be like, you're doing a great job, like talking to them, being into with them. But we used to say whenever we were like pairing kids with new people, it should be like one verbal praise or like a pat on the back or a high five every 30 seconds to a minute. So it's gonna feel like a lot, but the quicker the kid can be like, oh, they're giving me so much attention, like I don't need to throw the table. And oh, I like them a lot, like maybe if I do this math worksheet with them, then I'll get that reinforcement, or I'll clean up in the lunchroom, someone will tell me good job. So it's just whatever that new environment is. When you're learning a skill, it kind of, the reinforcement fizzles out near the end because they can do it. They don't need all that help, they don't need the high fives and the praise. But then when you're transitioning to a new environment or a new person, you kind of start all over again. So they do need that like high levels of reinforcement in the new situation or with the new person, just to, and it might not take them, say it took them 3 years to learn that 2 + 2 is 4. Well, they already have that skill, so with a new person, it might take them a month to do it because they already know how to do it. They already have that skill in the repertoire, but so the time might be different. But it is essentially like starting over, which is why generalization takes kind of a long time. But we use these different like little strategies in the beginning. So when we're teaching math with the manipulables, using blocks and Legos and stickers, first, so that it kind of helps that generalization process out further down the long run.
I have a kiddo who does like verbal like stimming, but it's like very annoying 'cause it's like screaming almost. We have it pretty much like handled like in our room, like we taught like calm voice, calm body, and now we're trying to generalize it into his gen ed class. But when he does it for attention, we know to ignore it. Do you have any advice? 'Cause you can't ignore it. You can't ignore it in the gen ed, but it's like in the middle of the lesson he's doing it.
And the gen ed teachers don't like it.
Yeah.
Like, don't look at me.
Yeah. So if you know that it's for attention, like that's the function,
Yeah.
then you want to teach some kind of functionally equivalent behavior. So in your classroom, so before you even get to the gen ed classes, so in your classroom you're teaching him like raising your hand gives you attention, or being like, hey, look at me, and gives him the attention, or some kind of response that's going to have the same effect as screaming. And then in that gen ed classroom, you're going to have to tell the teacher and all the other students to just ignore him. And if he has a para or like a peer tutor, maybe you teach another peer in that classroom, like when he does start screaming, to lean over and be like, hey, raise your hand. And the minute his hand goes up, the teacher's like, what's up? Like, what do you have something to say? And kind of influencing that, and then that immediate reinforcement of the raising your hand, getting the attention can decrease over time.
Yeah,
But
that's the first step.
you're gonna have to, yeah, and I'm sure that at home in his entire history, screaming has gotten him attention, so that's just a hard habit to break. But definitely teaching him some sort of, I need attention, look at me, hey, that's the same as screaming,
Okay.
is gonna have the same response, so it's the same, like functional
Yeah.
equivalent kind of thing.
Do the same thing.
And since he's already in your classroom and not doing it, probably gonna be quicker to learn in your classroom, like, oh, if I raise my hand, I get this, and then you can take that skill and be like, in your gen ed classroom, do this, is a lot easier than being like, in your gen ed classroom, don't do this.
Yeah.
So you have something that can be like,
Positive.
right.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, Kendall has my email too, if anyone has any questions, and I will send out the video too if you wanna rewatch it. But yeah, happy to answer any questions or in the future.
No, that was great. I have one like that. We're just starting to get her in the gen ed classroom. Yeah.
And it's kind of, you're kind of starting all over again, which is that the generalization of like, I can be really good in this classroom, but I can't be really good in this classroom.
Well, and yeah, and it depends who she's with.
Mhm.
And there's some days when I don't have a para, so she doesn't go, and all those inconsistencies make it so fun.
Yeah. I'm making sure everyone's on the same team, so when they do go to that gen ed classroom and they're screaming, I know the gen ed teachers don't like it, but you can tell them like, hey, it's gonna be 5 days of screaming and then it's gonna fizzle out, kind of thing. Like the faster everyone gets on board, the faster we can X-nay this behavior and get it out the door.
I tell the gen ed teachers it's like a family, like one bad week of like just ignoring them or whatever, and it'll be fine.
It's hard too when there's other kids in the classroom because they're all like, what are you doing? Like, stop. And they're providing the attention.
Yeah.
But that's where it comes into either he has like a peer tutor or a para or just someone else in the classroom that's like, raise your hand. And like,
Yeah.
maybe you have someone in the gen ed classroom who's like the top student helper or teacher helper or whatever. And they're the one that can be like, hey, raise your hand. And then
Yeah.
kind of thing. So he has something that he can do to get attention instead of just being like, don't do this.
Yeah.
There's some kind of choice And if you have the long enough, so if you have the choice and you have the long enough, okay, the screaming is getting ignored, it's getting ignored. If I raise my hand, like that's getting attention, and the choice kind of becomes a little bit easier because they're like, oh, well, I know that I'm not gonna get attention in here for screaming, but I will if I raise my hand.
It's hard 'cause I have 2 kiddos, but they do it like back and forth
To each other? Yeah,
Yeah,
so they're
that's
doing
hard.
attention from each other.
Give me headache.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Alright, cool.
Okay, thank you.
Thank y'all for coming.
Let's see if I